palace glowed like a mirage rising from the desert, its marble towers lit in gold and crimson. Guests from across continents arrived in fleets of black cars, their diamonds flashing under the chandeliers as though the stars themselves had been invited to the world. It was a wedding of dreams, the kind that would grace society magazines and whisper conversations in London, Paris, and New York. But to Layla, standing behind the carved wooden doors in her shimmering white gown, it felt like performance staged for everyone except her. She adjusted the silk veil with trembling fingers. Her reflection in the mirror smiled like a stranger, radiant, flawless, yet hollow behind the eyes. She had always imagined marriage as a leap into freedom, into passion, but here it resembled a gilded cage waiting to snap shut. The music swelled. The doors opened. Sheikh Khalid, her new husband-to-be, stood at the altar draped in robes of cream and gold, his face a mask of serenity. He was 20 years older, wealthy beyond measure, his fortune built on oil and real estate. His power drew people like moths to flame. His eyes, though dark, steady, unblinking, were the only thing that broke the illusion of warmth. Layla walked forward, the gown's train whispering across the polished floor. Every step carried her deeper into a world she didn't entirely choose. "You look breathtaking," whispered a guest as she passed. "She's lucky," murmured another, their tone dripping envy. Lucky. The word tasted bitter. When she reached Khalid, his hand enclosed hers with a grip that was firm, almost possessive. His lips curved into a smile that did not reach his eyes. The ceremony unfolded with practiced elegance. Vows were exchanged in a blend of Arabic and English. Applause thundered as rings slid onto fingers, sealing more than love, sealing an unspoken contract of power, status, and control. As the crowd erupted in celebration, Layla felt his gaze on her. Not a tender gaze, not the proud glance of a new husband. It was heavier, assessing, as though he were already measuring her boundaries, studying where she might bend and where she might break. At the reception, crystal glasses clinked as champagne poured like rivers. Exotic dancers spun to the rhythm of drums, and laughter echoed to the grand hall. Layla moved from table to table, smiling until her cheeks ached. Every guest congratulated her, every word more suffocating than the last. "A fairy tale wedding," said her cousin Sophia, visiting from London. "You've won the world, Layla." Layla leaned close, her voice trembling. "Or lost myself." Sophia blinked confused, but before she could answer, Khalid appeared at Layla's side. "The bride must not tire herself," he said smoothly, his hand pressing against her back. "She belongs to me now." The words, though spoken with charm, carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Later that evening, fireworks painted the desert sky. The guests gasped at the display, their faces lit in bursts of red and gold. Layla stood apart on the balcony, watching the sparks fade into blackness. Her hands rested on the railing, the night air cool against her skin. Behind her, Khalid's shadow stretched long and unyielding. "Do you see, Layla?" he said softly, almost tender. "This city, this life, all of it is yours now. Nothing will ever harm you, not while you are mine." The last word echoed inside her chest like a lock clicking shut. She forced a smile, nodding, but her mind whispered warnings she dared not voice. For every firework that bloomed in the sky, a flicker of unease burned inside her, darker and more enduring than any celebration. When the final spark faded, she turned and saw his eyes again, steady, consuming, impossible to escape. And in that gaze, Layla knew the wedding was not the beginning of her fairy tale. It was the beginning of something else entirely. The morning after the wedding, Layla awoke to silence. No laughter, no chatter cousins, no music. Only the echo of her footsteps on marble floors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The palace, so alive the night before, now resembled a museum, cold, vast, and watchful. Servants bowed as she passed. Their eyes darted away quickly, too quickly, as if looking at her for more than a second would invite punishment. Every hallway smelled faintly of rose water, every corner polished to perfection. Yet beneath the glitter of chandeliers, Layla felt the weight of rules she hadn't been told, only expected to obey. At breakfast, Khalid sat at the head of a long table, a solitary figure surrounded by untouched silver platters. Layla lowered herself into the chair beside him. "Sleep well?" he asked, his tone light, though his eyes lingered on her face with quiet scrutiny. "Yes," she lied. "The palace, it's beautiful." He nodded once. "It is your duty to honor it. You will not wander alone. You will not leave the grounds without me. These are not requests, Layla, they are expectations." Her stomach tightened. "Of course." The words were polite, but inside she recoiled. Even as she sipped the sweet tea, her mind whispered, "I am already a prisoner." Days blended into each other. She spent mornings walking the garden under the watch of a discreet but ever-present guard. Afternoons were filled with charity meetings and photo sessions, smiling beside Khalid while journalists snapped pictures of the perfect union. Nights, however, belonged to her secrets. In the privacy of her room, after the lights dimmed, she opened a leather-bound journal she had hidden beneath her gowns. Her pen scratched across the page with urgency. "I don't know who I am here. I don't know if I belong to myself anymore. He watches me even when he doesn't speak. The servants avoid me. The air itself feels owned." She paused, listening for footsteps outside her door, then continued. "If anyone ever finds this journal, it will be proof that I saw the bars of the cage long before it closed around me." The ink smeared as her hand shook. During dinners, Khalid tested her boundaries with quiet corrections. "Do not speak when business is discussed. Sit straighter. You laugh too loudly." Each remark seemed small, but they chipped away at her until she felt less like a wife and more like a porcelain doll, placed for display. The servants whispered when she entered the kitchen unexpectedly. Conversations broke mid-sentence. Once, she caught a maid muttering in Arabic before quickly bowing and fleeing. Layla didn't understand the words, but she recognized fear when she saw it. At night, she dreamed of London streets, the noise of taxis, the smell of coffee at her favorite corner cafe. She would wake with tears soaking her pillow, staring at the ceiling carved with golden patterns that mocked her with their perfection. One evening, she dared to speak. "Khalid, I feel lonely here." He set down his glass slowly, his expression unreadable. "Lonely? You are surrounded by beauty and privilege most women would kill for. If that is not enough, perhaps you should learn gratitude." The chill in his voice silenced her. She never raised the subject again. By the end of the second week, Layla's smiles in public were rehearsed, her laughter hollow. She learned when to lower her eyes, when to nod, when to remain still. She adapted, not because she wanted to, but because resistance seemed dangerous. Still, each night, the journal grew thicker with fear, and with each entry, she felt more certain. The cage was closing tighter, and if she didn't find a way out soon, she would lose herself completely. On the 17th night, as she blew out the candle, her phone buzzed with a number she thought she'd erased from her life. Her heart lurched. Her past had found her, and with it, the danger that would shatter everything. The phone buzzed again in the dark, faint and insistent, like a heart beating where it shouldn't. Layla froze under the sheets, her pulse racing louder than the sound itself. She had erased that number months ago, or so she thought, but the digits glowing on the screen told her otherwise. Daniel. Her chest tightened. London's familiar past, calling from across the sea into the suffocating silence of the palace. She stared at the phone until it nearly stopped ringing, then swiped to answer with trembling fingers. "Layla." His voice was low, urgent, the accent soft and devastatingly familiar. "Please, don't hang up." She swallowed, whispering, "You shouldn't have called." "I had to. I've heard things about him. I don't trust that you're safe there." Tears pricked at her eyes, though she fought to keep her voice steady. "I made my choice, Daniel. It's over." "Then why are you whispering?" His words cut through her defenses. "Because you're scared." "I can hear it." The truth stung. She wanted to scream that he was right, that she was suffocating behind marble walls, that every step she took was watched. But even in the secrecy of her room, fear held her tongue. From the hallway came the faintest creak. She stiffened, clutching the phone tighter. "I can't talk," she whispered. "He'll hear me." "Then listen to me. Leave. Come back to London. Tonight, tomorrow, I don't care. Just—" The call cut off, not disconnected. Ended. She turned slowly. Khalid stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the half-light. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy enough to crush. "Who was that?" His voice was quiet, too quiet. Her mouth went dry. "No one. A wrong number." He stepped closer, each footfall echoing. "At midnight? In English? You expect me to believe this." She forced her hand steady as she set the phone on the table. "It doesn't matter. I ended it." The words slipped before she could stop them. His eyes narrowed. "Ended what?" Layla's heart slammed against her ribs. She drew in a shaky breath. "Nothing. You're imagining things." His gaze lingered on her face, searching, dissecting. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the door closing with a quiet finality that was somehow louder than a slam. She collapsed onto the bed, shaking. The walls themselves seemed to lean closer, suffocating her. The next morning, the palace felt colder. Servants avoided her eyes more than ever. At breakfast, Khalid's silence was worse than any accusation. He stirred his coffee without looking at her, but the tension in the air was undeniable, a predator waiting to strike. Layla retreated into herself. She went through the motions, garden walks, rehearsed smiles, public appearances, but she felt his suspicion trailing her like a shadow. At night, she wrote in her journal, "I've broken something. He knows. Even if he doesn't say it, he knows. And now I don't know what's more dangerous, his silence or his questions." Sleep became impossible. Every sound, a closing door, a footstep in the corridor, even the rustle of curtains, sent her heart racing. She imagined Khalid listening outside her room, piecing together her secrets, preparing for a punishment she could not yet name. Days later, she overheard two servants whispering in the courtyard. Their voices dropped the moment they saw her, but one phrase clung to her ears like a curse. "The other women." The word spun in her mind long after they scurried away. Who were these other women? What had happened to them? And why did the servants speak of them in fear? That night, as she closed her journal, she felt the same sensation as before, eyes on her, watching from shadows. She turned sharply toward the balcony, but found only darkness. Still, the certainty remained. Her forbidden call had planted a seed of suspicion, and it was growing fast inside her husband's mind. The phrase echoed in her mind for days. The other women. It clung to her like a shadow, coloring every glance from the servants, every silent corridor, every look in Khalid's eyes. She began to notice details she had ignored before, the hushed voices that fell quiet when she entered, the way some of the maids crossed themselves when his name was spoken, the fear that lingered even in laughter. One afternoon, while walking in the palace garden, Layla felt the weight of someone following. She turned to find Amal, a young servant with timid eyes, clutching a tray she had no reason to carry outdoors. Amal lowered her gaze quickly, but her lips trembled as if holding back words. "Amal," Layla asked softly, "what is it?" The girl hesitated, glancing around. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Be careful, madam. You are not the first." Layla's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Amal shook her head. "I cannot speak more. They watch us too. But the others, they vanished. No one speaks their names now." Before Layla could press further, Amal turned and hurried away, disappearing behind the rose hedges as if the words themselves had endangered her. That night, Layla sat at her dressing table, staring at her reflection. She traced the outline of her face with her finger, wondering how long before her name, too, was spoken only in whispers. Her journal entries grew darker. There were others, women who came before me, and now they are gone. Did they leave, or were they erased? If I stay, will I become one of them? At dinners, she found herself scrutinizing Khalid, searching his expression for cracks. His smile seemed thinner, his patience shorter. Once, when she accidentally knocked over a glass, his hand slammed the table hard enough to silence the entire room. "Clumsy," he muttered, though his voice carried menace rather than mockery. The fear inside her deepened. She began to plan in secret. Small steps, desperate measures. She memorized the palace layout, counting how many guards patrolled the gates at night. She watched which doors were locked, which remained ajar. Every night she tucked a small envelope of money beneath her mattress, gathering what little she could. But with every precaution, she knew she was already running out of time. One evening, as she passed through the library, she overheard two older servants speaking in hushed tones. "The Sheikh's temper grows worse," one said. "Do you remember Layla, the dancer?" The other shook her head quickly. "Don't speak of her. Walls have ears." Layla pressed herself against the shelves, her pulse hammering. The servants left, leaving her alone with silence and terror. That night, she confronted Khalid with careful words. "Why do the servants fear you?" He looked up from his book, his expression calm but chilling. "Fear is the root of respect." "Do you not respect me, Layla?" She lowered her eyes. "Of course I do. Then you should fear me as well." His words fell like a stone into a still pond, ripples spreading through her chest. She excused herself quickly, retreating to her room where she locked the door and pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle a scream. Her mind spun. She could no longer deny the truth. The palace was not a home. It was a trap, and Khalid its keeper. She closed her journal with trembling fingers, writing one final line before blowing out the candle. "If I am to survive, I must find a way out before he decides my fate." The next evening, Khalid announced they would host a grand dinner with powerful guests. His voice was smooth, his smile practiced, but in Layla's gut, dread twisted like a knife. The palace shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers cast golden reflections across marble floors, and the scent of saffron and roasted lamb drifted through the banquet hall. It was meant to be a night of opulence. Ministers, businessmen, and foreign dignitaries gathered beneath one roof, their laughter swelling like music. Layla sat at Khalid's side, her dress a flowing cascade of emerald silk. From a distance, she looked every bit the elegant hostess, her smile painted carefully in place. But beneath the fabric, her hands trembled. She remembered Amal's warning, the whispers of the other women. Tonight, she felt the invisible bars of the cage closing tighter than ever. The dinner began with polite speeches and staged compliments. Khalid spoke of prosperity and legacy, his voice calm and commanding. Guests leaned in, hanging on his every word, their admiration feeding his pride. Layla's role was clear. Smile, nod, remain silent. But then it happened. A servant placed a plate before her, and in her nervousness, Layla reached for the wrong utensil. A minor mistake, barely worth notice. Yet Khalid's hand froze mid-gesture. The table went silent. "Layla," he said, his voice sharp enough to pierce the chatter, "you disgrace yourself." Her cheeks burned. I'm sorry." He didn't let her finish. "A wife of mine does not stumble like a peasant at my table. Learn your place." The guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between them. A nervous laugh escaped one man, quickly silenced by Khalid's glare. Layla lowered her gaze, her throat closing around words she dared not speak. The dinner carried on, but the mood had shifted. Laughter returned, thinner, forced. Layla's humiliation hung in the air, poisoning every sip of wine, every polite toast. When the last guest departed and the doors shut, silence settled over the hall like a suffocating fog. Khalid's footsteps echoed as he approached her. "Do you know what you did tonight?" His tone was calm, too calm. She forced herself to meet his eyes. It was a mistake. Nothing more. His hand struck before she could blink. The sharp sting across her cheek stole her breath. "Nothing more," he hissed. "I gave you a kingdom, and you repay me with shame." Tears welled, but she refused to let them fall. "You humiliated me before them all." For a second, shock flickered in his eyes, at her defiance. Then rage consumed it. He seized her wrist, dragging her through the hall, his grip bruising. "You will learn," he growled, "one way or another." He shoved her into their chamber, the heavy door slamming shut. The walls seemed to shrink as his shadow loomed over her. The argument spiraled, words colliding with venom. Layla's voice cracked with desperation. "I am not your prisoner." His reply was a roar. "You are mine. Body, name, soul, all mine." The violence that followed left her crumpled against the bed frame, her breath ragged, her body aching. He left her there, walking out with the same calm composure he had worn at dinner, as if nothing had happened. When the door clicked shut, silence swallowed the room. Layla pulled herself onto the bed, clutching her bruised wrist, her cheek throbbing. She wanted to scream, to run, to tear the palace apart brick by brick. Instead, she reached for her journal with shaking hands. Tonight, he showed me what he truly is. Not a husband, not a protector, a captor. And I am nothing more than his possession. If I stay, he will break me until nothing is left. The words blurred with tears, her pen dragging across the page. At last, she collapsed onto the pillow, her body trembling, her heart hammering against the silence. The bruises throbbed like reminders of what she had become, a prisoner in silk. Outside, the palace was dark, quiet, serene. But inside her chest, a storm raged, whispering one terrifying truth. If she didn't find a way to escape, her life would not belong to her much longer. The bruises on Layla's skin deepened overnight, dark blossoms spreading across her wrist and cheek. By morning, even the act of brushing her hair sent waves of pain through her body. The palace servants glanced at her once, then lowered their eyes. None dared ask. None dared help. Khalid was gone most of the day, entertaining foreign investors. His absence left the palace eerily quiet, but not safe. Layla felt him everywhere, in the walls, in the silence, in the fear that clung to her like perfume. That evening, she locked herself inside her chamber. A storm brewed beyond the palace walls, thunder rolling across the desert sky. She lit a single candle, its flame trembling like her own resolve, and pulled her journal from beneath the mattress. The pen felt heavy in her hand. She hesitated, then began to write. If anyone ever finds this, know that I tried to survive. Know that I saw what was coming and still could not stop it. Khalid is not the man he pretends to be. He is dangerous. He is violent. He will kill me. Her hand shook. She pressed harder, the ink bleeding into the page. I thought love could save me. I thought I could endure. But every day I lose a piece of myself. Every bruise tells me the truth. I am not his wife. I am his possession, his prisoner, his next victim. Her chest tightened as thunder cracked outside, rattling the windows. For a moment, she thought she heard footsteps in the corridor. She froze, staring at the door, waiting. Nothing, only silence. She forced herself to continue. I wanted to escape. I planned it in secret, but I fear he already knows. He watches me too closely. He hears things I don't say. If he discovers this journal. The pen slipped, dragging a jagged line across the paper. Her breath caught. She thought she heard the handle of the door shift. Quickly, she wrote again, pressing harder, as though the urgency itself could outpace danger. If I disappear, if my body is never found, let these words speak for me. He did this. Khalid did this. Remember my name, Layla, and do not believe the lies he will tell. The ink stopped mid-letter. The pen dropped, clattering against the table. Her eyes widened at the sound. The door creaked open. Layla? Khalid's voice slid into the room, soft but chilling. What are you doing? She slammed the journal shut, shoving it beneath a stack of scarves. Her voice cracked as she forced a smile. Nothing, just writing letters. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on the table where the candle flickered beside the still wet ink. For a moment, she thought he would pull the scarves aside and expose her secret. Instead, he only smiled faintly. Letters can wait. Come, sit with me. Her heart pounded. She nodded, rising slowly, her legs unsteady. As she left the room with him, the candle guttered out, leaving her chamber in darkness. On the desk, the journal remained, its last page unfinished, the final words frozen mid-sentence. It would be months before investigators opened it, their hands trembling as they read the last entry that ended too soon. The palace awoke to unease the next morning. Servants whispered about Layla's absence at breakfast, their trays of fruit and coffee untouched at her seat. Khalid's expression remained calm, but his silence carried a weight that silenced the room. By midday, her chamber was empty, the bed still made, her clothes untouched, the candle on her desk burned to a stub. Only the faint scent of rose water lingered, as though she had been erased overnight. Khalid claimed she had driven out to the coast to clear her mind. His words were delivered with perfect composure, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. Hours later, a call reached the police. Layla's luxury car had been found abandoned on a lonely stretch of desert highway. Its engine was off, the doors unlocked, the sand creeping over the tires as if the desert itself had begun to claim it. Inside, her purse and passport were missing, but her scarf lay crumpled on the passenger seat, stained with a single drop of blood. Detectives swarmed the scene. Flashing lights painted the dunes in red and blue. Officers crouched by the car, scanning for prints, their radios crackling against the vast silence of the desert night. Captain Rami, leading the investigation, tightened his jaw. "This doesn't look like a voluntary disappearance," he muttered to his deputy. "She didn't just walk away from this." Back at the palace, Khalid sat across from investigators, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "When did you last see your wife?" Rami asked. "At dinner," Khalid replied smoothly. "She was upset. She needed space. I allowed her freedom." "What time exactly?" "Near midnight. She went to her room. I didn't disturb her after that." But when questioned separately, a servant revealed seeing the sheikh enter Layla's chamber shortly after midnight. Contradictions began to knot the air. The press seized on the story within hours. Headlines spread across Dubai and beyond. Millionaire Sheikh's bride missing in desert mystery. Where's Layla? European bride vanishes weeks after wedding. Reporters gathered outside the palace gates, cameras flashing against the gold-trimmed walls. The Sheikh security tried to push them back, but microphones stretched through the bars. Questions shouted like accusations. "Did you kill her, Sheikh Khalid? Why was her car abandoned in the desert? Were you hiding?" Khalid, flanked by guards, gave a carefully measured statement. "My wife is a free spirit. I respect her independence. I believe she left of her own will, and I ask the public to give us privacy while she finds her way home." But his eyes betrayed no grief, no urgency, only calculation. Inside the palace, rumors spread faster than fire. A maid whispered to another that she had seen Khalid burn a bundle of scarves in the courtyard that morning. Another swore she heard screams in the night, but dared not speak aloud. Fear kept them silent, but suspicion festered like a wound. Meanwhile, detectives pressed harder. They recovered fragments of security footage from a roadside camera near the desert. The grainy video showed Layla's car slowing to a stop. Minutes later, another vehicle, black with tinted windows, pulled up behind it. After that, the recording cut out, corrupted, or erased. Rami replayed the footage late into the night, frustration building. "This isn't random," he told his team. "She was followed. Someone wanted her gone." The journal, discovered hidden beneath her scarves, would soon change everything. But for now it lay unseen, its inked warning waiting to shatter Khalid's facade. In the press, theories multiplied. Some painted Layla as a runaway bride, fleeing a suffocating marriage. Others whispered darker rumors, that she had discovered secrets meant never to be exposed. The desert became a stage for speculation, the silence more damning than any evidence. 3 nights after her disappearance, a sandstorm swept across Dubai, scouring the highway where a car still sat, now cordoned off with police tape. The storm howled like an omen, burying tracks, erasing clues, and deepening the mystery. Khalid stood at his balcony, watching the storm consume the horizon. His jaw tightened, his reflection in the glass sharp and cold. Below him, reporters braved the wind, their cameras fixed on the palace that now looked less like a home and more like a fortress guarding secrets. And somewhere, beyond the dunes, Layla's voice lingered only in the pages of her unfinished journal, waiting for the world to finally hear her. The desert gave up its secret on the 4th morning after Layla's disappearance. A shepherd stumbled upon it first, his goat skittering nervously around a shallow dune. He thought it was a mannequin at first, pale skin catching the sun, hair tangled like weeds in the sand. But when he stepped closer, the truth hit him with the force of a blow. He staggered back, retching, before fumbling with his phone to call the police. The body lay half buried, wind-scoured and horrifying. Only the upper torso remained, severed cleanly at the waist. The desert had preserved it, but the image was brutal. Layla's face pale, her lips frozen in silence, eyes half open as if still pleading. Forensic investigators arrived swiftly, their vehicles carving tracks through the sand. They worked in silence, the air heavy with dread. One officer muttered a prayer under his breath. Another turned away, unable to meet the sight. Captain Rami crouched near the body, his gloves trembling slightly as he brushed sand from Layla's hair. "God help her," he whispered. Then, louder, "Search the area. We need the rest. Look for tire marks, footprints, anything." But the desert was merciless. The sandstorm days earlier had wiped everything clean, as though nature itself conspired to hide the crime. The autopsy later confirmed what the scene suggested. The cut was not the work of wild animals, nor an accident. It was deliberate, precise, cold. Dr. Hannah, the forensic pathologist, removed her mask slowly after hours in the sterile morgue. "This wasn't rage," she told Rami. "This was method. Whoever did this wanted her body to send a message. A warning." Rami asked, his voice low. "Or an erasure," she said grimly. "Half a body means half the truth." Someone wanted us to question what really happened. News of the discovery exploded across Dubai. Headlines screamed in red banners. Bride's mutilated remains found in desert. Only half a body. What happened to Layla? Public grief mingled with morbid fascination. Candlelight vigils appeared outside European embassies. Social media overflowed with images of Layla's wedding day, now paired with hashtags demanding justice. The palace, meanwhile, bristled with controlled fury. Khalid granted a rare interview, seated in a gilded armchair as cameras recorded his every word. "I am devastated by this tragedy," he said smoothly, his voice almost soothing. "Layla was my beloved wife. I will not rest until her killers are brought to justice." Yet his eyes betrayed nothing. No grief, no pain, only a stillness that unsettled even the journalists who sat across from him. When asked why his account of the night clashed with his servants' testimonies, he smiled faintly. People imagine things when emotions run high. Grief makes witnesses unreliable. Do not mistake gossip for truth. Behind closed doors, detectives were less convinced. Rami pored over Layla's journal late into the night. The final page haunted him. The words that cut off mid-sentence. The trembling scrawl of a woman who foresaw her death. "He did this," she had written. The words echoed like a curse. But evidence remained thin. No weapon. No clear timeline. No witnesses willing to risk defying a man as powerful as Khalid. Whispers spread nonetheless. Some speculated the mutilation carried ritual significance, an ancient desert punishment. Others whispered that Layla had uncovered secrets involving Khalid's business empire, and silencing her had been both personal and political. Still, Khalid moved the storm untouched, attending charity galas, appearing at business meetings, his composure unshaken. If he mourned privately, behind walls too high for anyone to see. One evening, as Rami left the morgue, he spotted Khalid's convoy gliding past. The Sheikh sat inside, gazing calmly through the tinted glass at the very building where Layla's remains were kept. Their eyes met briefly through the reflection. Khalid lifted a hand, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement, as though to remind the captain that he, too, was watching. Rami's stomach tightened. The investigation had just begun, but already he sensed the balance of power shifting. Layla's half-body had been found, but the truth, the whole truth, was still buried somewhere in the desert. And Khalid, too calm, too calculating, seemed to know it would never be unearthed. The discovery of Layla's mutilated body had shaken Dubai, but the story twisted darker when a new figure stepped from the shadows. Her name was Samira. Young, elegant, and impossibly poised, she appeared at the police headquarters 2 nights after the body was found. A silk scarf covered her face, but her eyes burned with urgency. "I have information," she whispered to the guard, her voice low. "About the Sheikh. About Layla." Captain Rami listened carefully as Samira was ushered into a dim interrogation room. She removed her scarf, revealing sharp cheekbones and a face lined with both beauty and exhaustion. "Who are you to Khalid?" Rami asked. She exhaled shakily. "His mistress. For 3 years." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Samira explained that she had been kept in an apartment in the city, lavishly maintained but hidden from public view. Khalid visited her in secret, promising her wealth, promising her eventual marriage. But when Layla entered the picture, everything changed. He married her because she was foreign, Samira said bitterly. It gave him status, connections. But she was cleverer than he expected. She found out about me. And worse, she found out about his money. Rami leaned forward. What money? Samira hesitated, her hands trembling. Then she pulled a small USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. He used me as a messenger sometimes. I carried files, documents I never fully understood, but I made copies, bank transfers, offshore accounts, fraud at a scale you cannot imagine. Her voice cracked. Layla saw the documents. She confronted him. She told me she was afraid he would silence her. The captain's stomach sank. This was no longer only a murder investigation. This was a web of deceit stretching into financial empires, corruption, perhaps even government ties. Later that night, Rami studied the files. They revealed staggering sums funneled through shell companies, linking Khalid to bribes, smuggling, and shadow partners across continents. Layla must have stumbled onto the truth and sealed her fate. Meanwhile, the press caught whispers of a mistress. Tabloids splashed Samira's blurred photo across front pages. The Sheikh's secret lover. Did jealousy drive him to murder? Mistress claims missing bride. Discovered fraud. The palace responded with icy dismissal. Khalid released a statement. These allegations are fabricated by opportunists seeking fame. My business is legitimate. My grief is genuine. But in private, his fury simmered. Security cameras captured him slamming a glass against the marble floor, shards scattering as his guards looked on silently. Back in her apartment, Samira wept as she packed hurriedly. She knew the risk of speaking out. Already, she sensed eyes following her, shadows lingering too long near her car. He will kill me, too, she whispered to herself, clutching the scarf tighter around her face. Her testimony shifted the case dramatically. Rami now had motive layered upon motive. Jealousy, betrayal, money, reputation. But Khalid remained untouchable, his influence shielding him from direct charges. In the city, people debated endlessly. Some sympathized with Samira, painting her as another victim of Khalid's manipulation. Others scorned her, calling her complicit in his lies, until it no longer served her. But the truth was undeniable. Layla's death was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was tied to an empire of greed. The mistress had cracked the mask. And now, beneath the gold and wealth, Khalid's world was beginning to bleed. As Rami stared at the files glowing on his laptop screen, he knew one thing with certainty. Layla had not died for love. She had died for money. And the man who had everything now had everything to lose. The city held its breath when the news broke. Sheikh Khalid had been arrested. Armored vehicles surrounded his palace before dawn, headlights cutting through the mist. Armed officers stormed the gates, their boots pounding against marble as servants scattered in terror. Khalid emerged calm, draped in a silk robe, his wrists extended with a faint smile as if amused by the spectacle. "Do you know who I am?" he asked Captain Rami as the cuffs locked shut. "I know exactly who you are," Rami replied coldly. The arrest electrified the public. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, some demanding justice, others defending Khalid as a victim of conspiracy. International media descended, their cameras flashing as he was led inside, the image of wealth and power now framed by steel bars. But the trial was unlike any ordinary proceeding. From the start, Khalid's influence seeped through the walls of justice. His legal team, a phalanx of elite attorneys in tailored suits, flooded the courtroom with motions and objections. Evidence went missing. Bank records tied to fraud disappeared from secure vaults. 2 key witnesses, Samira and a palace servant, never made it to testify. One vanished on her way to the courthouse. The other withdrew his statement under family pressure. Whispers filled the city. Threats, bribes, entire lives bought and silenced. Inside the courtroom, Khalid sat poised, his expression unshaken. He leaned toward his lawyer often, occasionally flashing the faintest smile at the jury, as though reminding him of the wealth and protection his name carried. The prosecution struggled, their case fraying at every seam. The mistress's files were ruled inadmissible due to questions of authenticity. Forensics on Layla's body were contested by experts Khalid's team had flown in from abroad. Every piece of evidence seemed to dissolve in the fire of influence. Only one thing remained untouched: Layla's journal. The slim leather-bound book sat on the prosecutor's desk like a silent witness. Its pages, stained with ink and fear, carried the raw voice of a woman who had predicted her own death. On the 5th day of trial, the prosecutor rose, holding the journal aloft. The courtroom stilled. "This is not hearsay. This is testimony," she declared, her voice steady. "It is the voice of a victim silenced forever, but preserved in her own hand." The judge allowed the pages to be read aloud. A hush swept over the gallery as Layla's final words echoed. "He will kill me. If I disappear, let these words speak for me." Gasps rippled through the chamber. One juror wiped tears from her eyes. Even seasoned reporters shifted uncomfortably, their pens frozen above their notepads. Khalid's composure flickered for the first time. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing like blades. He whispered sharply to his lawyer, who rose with objections, claims of forgery, of manipulation. But the damage was done. The journal had pierced the veil. Still, shadows lingered. Outside the courthouse, armored SUVs lined the streets. Protesters clashed, some chanting for justice, others waving banners defending their sheikh. At night, rumors swirled of jurors being followed, their families receiving anonymous calls. Captain Rami knew the outcome was no longer in the hands of law alone. It was a battle between truth and power, between a dead woman's words and a man who could buy silence with a glance. On the final day of testimony, Khalid himself took the stand. His voice was calm, even tender, as he painted himself as a grieving husband. "She was fragile," he told the jury. "She dreamed too much, feared too much. I loved her. I tried to protect her. But I could not protect her from herself." His words slid like silk, yet the journal's shadow lingered over every sentence. The trial ended with the jury retreating behind closed doors. The world watched, waiting for a verdict. And in the silence that followed, it became clear: no matter the outcome, Layla's voice had returned to haunt him. The courtroom air was heavy, suffocating. As the jury filed back in, every footstep echoed like a drumbeat of fate. Layla's photograph, once radiant in her wedding gown, stared from the press boards behind the gallery. The silence was so complete that even a shuffle of papers seemed like thunder. Captain Rami leaned forward, jaw tight. Across the aisle, Khalid sat still, his suit immaculate, his cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights. He looked less like a man on trial, and more like a king awaiting a coronation. The foreman cleared his throat. "On the charge of murder," he hesitated, the pause dragging out, "cruel and unbearable. We find the defendant guilty." Gasps ripped through the chamber. Reporters leapt to their feet, cameras clicking like gunfire. Layla's family, seated in the front row, clutched each other, sobbing. For a moment, it seemed justice had finally broken through Khalid's wall of power. But then came the second half of the verdict. On the recommendation of sentence, given lack of sufficient physical evidence, the jury advises reduced sentencing. The defendant is to serve 10 years in a private facility under state supervision. The words landed like a blade in the gut. 10 years. Not life. Not death. A decade in what everyone knew would be a palace disguised as a prison. Outrage erupted. 10 years, someone shouted from the gallery. Protesters outside began chanting, their voices muffled but rising like a storm. Layla's mother stood, trembling. "You call this justice?" she cried, her voice breaking. "He took my daughter's life, half her body, and you give him 10 years. Guards moved quickly, guiding her out as cameras followed every tear-stained step. Khalid's lips curled into the faintest smile. Even in guilt, he had won. The sentence was a compromise, a half measure carved out by his lawyers and influence. Reporters flooded the steps of the courthouse, microphones thrust into Rami's face. "Captain, is this justice a betrayal?" One demanded. Rami's eyes were shadowed. Justice was delivered. he said carefully, though his voice lacked conviction. But justice at a price is no justice at all. Around the world, reactions split. Some hailed the guilty verdict as a historic victory, proof that even the powerful could fall. Others condemned the sentence as hollow, a performance dressed up as fairness. Social media boiled with fury, hashtags demanding real justice for Layla. Layla's family withdrew from the spotlight, retreating into grief. Her sister, interviewed briefly, spoke with raw bitterness. "We begged for truth. We got half a body, half a verdict. My sister deserved more." Meanwhile, Khalid was escorted from the courtroom, still composed. Outside, protesters hurled insults, some even shoes, as guards shielded him. He didn't flinch. He moved as though untouchable, as though 10 years was merely an inconvenience. That night, the city burned with debate. Crowds gathered in the streets, candles flickering in memory of Layla, while others rioted, furious at a system bent under the weight of wealth. Police sirens wailed into the early hours. In his cell, more sweet than prison, Khalid sat by a window, gazing at the skyline. His hands rested on the journal the court had returned to evidence archives, its power now muted. He whispered softly, almost to himself, 10 years passes quickly. But for Layla's family, 10 years was an eternity stolen, a wound that time would not heal. Justice had come, but it was fractured, compromised, shadowed by money and power. And in that hollow space between victory and betrayal, Layla's story refused to rest. The uproar of the verdict faded, but the wound it left behind bled into the city for weeks. Crowds that once filled the courthouse steps dwindled. The chants demanding real justice became whispers, then fell silent. Yet silence in Dubai is never empty. It hums, heavy with what is left unsaid, and it carries itself across the desert winds. It was to that desert that Layla's story always returned. The highway stretched endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt dissolving into dunes that rose like ancient monuments. Here, where her abandoned car had once been discovered, the sand still bore the faint memory of tire tracks long since erased by storms. Travelers passed without knowing, their eyes shielded by sunglasses, their minds elsewhere. Few paused to imagine the terror that had filled the night she vanished. Reporters visited for weeks, cameras cutting wide shots of the barren horizon. This is when mystery deepens. One foreign anchor declared on air, his voice caught between solemnity and spectacle. Yet the desert never gave more than what it had already revealed. Half a body, half a truth. Layla's mother came once, escorted by Rami. She wore black, her face hidden under a veil, her steps slow as though each grain of sand resisted her. At the spot marked by a simple wooden stake, she dropped to her knees. "They gave me half of you," she whispered, her voice cracking. The rest the desert swallowed. Rami stood a few paces away, hat in his hands. He wanted to promise answers, to tell her that justice had been done, but the words curdled on his tongue. After the trial, he had come to believe what the desert itself seemed to whisper, that truth, like Layla's body, would always remain incomplete. The Sheikh, meanwhile, was locked away in his private wing of a state facility. 10 years. He spent his days reading newspapers that still carried his name and sipping imported coffee served by guards who owed him favors. His eyes often drifted toward the desert through the small barred window. To him, it was not a grave but a shield. A place that had kept secrets for centuries would surely keep his. Yet not everyone believed the story was finished. A journalist named Amira refused to let it rest. She revisited Layla's journals, the fragments saved from trial. She retraced the roads, spoke with servants still too frightened to testify, and pieced together whispers of hidden accounts and women who had disappeared before. Still, each time she reached the edge of revelation, doors slammed, files vanished, and sources recanted. The closer she came, the louder the silence grew. "The desert keeps its secrets," one old Bedouin told her as she recorded. His weathered eyes scanned the horizon. "It swallows men, women, even kings. But it never tells." Amira published what she could, stories tinged with both evidence and speculation. They sparked anger, pity, and, in some corners, exhaustion. People wanted closure, not riddles. And so, like the shifting sands, public memory moved on. Another scandal, another tragedy, another headline. Layla's name became a ghost of a hashtag. But for those who loved her, forgetting was impossible. Her sister kept her phone number saved, unable to delete the contact. Her mother lit a candle every Friday evening, placing it by the window so that its flame flickered against the dark. "So she knows," she whispered, "that we still wait for the rest of her." Years passed, and the dunes shifted again. The wooden stake marking the discovery site fell, buried by storms. What once was a scene of flashing cameras and police lights became indistinguishable from every other expanse of sand. The desert erases quickly. In the end, Layla's story was remembered in fragments. A wedding photo, a journal entry that trailed into silence, a body cut in half, and a verdict that satisfied no one. She became less a woman than a symbol, invoked when people spoke of power, money, and betrayal. But the desert did not care for symbols. It cared for silence. At dusk, when the wind rose and carried the sand in waves across the highway, the land seemed to whisper in a voice too old to understand. It told of love turned to fear, of promises broken, of truths buried. Yet it never told enough. The desert held Layla, or what remained of her, and in doing so, it held the rest of the story. The parts no jury heard, no reporter uncovered, no family could mourn. And as the sun sank, bleeding red over endless dunes, the desert kept its silence, keeping its secrets as it always had.